Hey guys, just quick announcement on the podcast here. This is Trevor. I realized while editing this episode and the next one that my mic software reset itself, and so my normal filter that's on my mic to cancel out all my breathing noises is not there. So if this episode and the next episode sound extra breathy, I apologize. But yeah, that's it. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back to Following Know It on a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 80, and we are jumping into part 4 of Oathbringer. We have 4 chapters and 4 different point of view characters to read from this week. And I've said this once before on the podcast, but I will refresh your guys' memories on this. Before Brandon Sanderson released Oathbringer, he said that Oathbringer was very much 2 stories pushed together into one book. And part 3 is the end of like one story, and then part 4 pushing into part 5 is another like complete new story arc. So here we are pushing into that after our interludes from last week. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing so great. We have a Szeth chapter this week. I could not be happier.
When's the last time you got a Szeth chapter?
It's been 80 years. It's been way
It's
too
been
long.
84 years.
Yeah.
Elliot, how are you?
Good. I'm good. I look forward to our recording sessions every week, and this was another one where I was just like itching to talk about this stuff, so I'm looking forward to it.
Sounds good. Paul, who's on our mug?
Yes, our grand mug this week. Oh, whoops, I almost spelled. Okay. Is Cody. Cody is a surgeon, and we really appreciate the support. So
Thank you, Cody.
today I have a little bitty espresso cup with some floral decor. So yes, if I can hold on to this properly, and thank you, Cody. We really appreciate it.
Where's-
Sorry. Oops.
Oh, there's the pinky. Thank you, Cody. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon.
Thank you.
And we'll start with you, Elliot, while Paul sips his water. Do you have 2 words to summarize this episode?
I do, as always, my 2 words for this set of chapters. The 2 words are broken and glow.
Okay, broken and glow. Paul?
I have my words written down. I'd almost forgotten them. So my 2 words for this week are reborn and marbles.
All right. Broken, glow, marbles, and reborn. Let's use these 4 words and push into part 4 of Oathbringer. All right, Paul, kick us off. What do your words mean?
Okay, so I'll go in order of least significant to most significant. So reborn is basically just about Szeth. I think that's even the chapter of the episode, or of the. Hold on.
The
title of the chapter.
There you
not
go.
the chapter of the episode. Title of the chapter with Szeth. We see a very cool depiction of Szeth and just a lot of stuff, which I'm really excited to talk to y'all about. As well as, like you said, starting in part 4 is kind of starting a new arc, I guess, and so you could look at it that way, like it's a reborn, I guess, sort of like this new arc as we go forth. So there's that. And marbles, I thought it was funny to talk about marbles with Shadesmar because it's just all these beads, and I couldn't help but think about marbles, and that is all. That's the deep significance there.
The whole shebang.
Yeah.
Elliot, your 2 words?
Broken and glow. Again, rather Szeth oriented for the most part. I picked broken because I think it explains where it touches on where a lot of our different characters are. I think Szeth is still inherently broken. I'm excited to actually see a little more of him to see where he's at kind of mentally, but I think there's still something a little snapped inside there. We'll see perhaps Dalinar's rather broken both in the past and the present, and Kaladin's in another fairly broken place right now. A lot of people in need of some mending, I think. And then Glow, because Shadesmar seems like a glowy place, and that there's maybe like all these little glows kind of just hanging out in different places. And then I think we've saw reference to this before, but getting reminded of Szeth's afterglow thing that he's got going on, which is a little strange, very strange. But
I think
that's why I picked
so
Glow.
Cool.
I
Coolest imagery maybe in the book so far.
was gonna save this.
So cool.
I was gonna save this for maybe next week or maybe later in this episode, but I'll go ahead and do it now. If you guys want to look at the most recent picture I put in the Discord for you guys and have a look at it, this is the sticker pack that came with the backer kit from last year for the Wave Kings Leatherbound, and I don't know if you guys can see it on my camera here, and I'll put it on the screen for you guys. But Szeth has his afterglow image coming in behind him on the sticker here, and it's in your general chat there. So there's Nail over here as one of the stickers, and then Szeth with his afterglow with Nightblood. So it's part of the backer kit that came.
Nice, very nice.
It's pretty dope. The imagery of like his soul isn't quite connected right or aligned right with his healing when Nail like healed him, right? He had to reconnect his soul, and now it's like a little bit off, and so as he moves, there's kind of like a glowy like shadow almost, and that is like the coolest imagery possibly ever. It's so dope. Like it's so cool. I couldn't get over it.
Szeth is back in with a very cool
literally
aura about him.
Yeah, I thought he was cool before,
Literally.
like aesthetically, like the Assassin in White or whatever. Like that's so cool. And now he's just like even cooler. Like, well done, bravo. My compliments to the chef.
All right. Before we talk a little bit more about Szeth and his weapon that he's newly acquired, we need to talk about Dalinar. It is Dalinar's book. We get a Dalinar flashback chapter for the first time since we've seen the death of Evie back in part 3. And this is 3 years later after what happened at the Rift. And Dalinar's a complete mess. For the last 3 years, on and off, he's been drowning his sorrows, drowning his madness in alcohol, to the point where his family starts hiding the alcohol around the palace from him, where they know he'll go after the alcohol when he's feeling weak. And Dalinar's mind is completely gone at this. I mean, it's not completely gone, but it's pretty far gone at this point. He'll see like a red carpet and say, "Oh, that's blood. That reminds me of Evie." Or he'll see fire and be like, "Oh, that reminds me of the Rift." Or he'll see his son Adolin or Renarin, and Renarin is, burning a prayer or whatever. It's like, "Oh, Evie used to burn prayers all the time." Like, everything reminds him of what he did to Evie. So that's where we pick up here. What did you guys think of our first glimpse of flashback Dalinar? We're inching closer to the reveal of the Night Watcher, which we know is coming. We don't really know how that's going to play out, though.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a whole lot to add there. He's in a really low spot right now. It's clearly wrecking his whole life. He's not dealing with it. It's leaked into every area of his life, like you're saying. Everything reminds him of what he's done. He can't get away from it.
It's definitely sad to see this. Because I feel like whenever we saw at the end of part 3, right, whenever there's kind of this reveal of Dalinar was like who was responsible for the death of Evie. It was really sad, but even after that, he resorted to like covering it up or like even blaming her in some instances of like, I can't believe she would do this or could try, that storming woman, like all this stuff. And we really see that like he obviously has a great deal of remorse over it. He isn't like completely cold-hearted to that. It's like really, really messed him up. And it's very sad to see.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think the best thing about our flashbacks is that we know how the character is now, and so it's way... Like, if this weren't the case, if we were, like, let's say this was set before this current time frame we're reading, and we were just reading this story, it would be, like, way scarier, I guess. Like, we know Delinar ends up to be, like, a great character, at least, but, yeah.
In some ways, what you're describing is comforting, and that we know that Dalinar gets to a better place. But in other ways, it's almost kind of worse, because how he gets from where he's at now in the flashbacks to the I'm honorable, I'm going to enforce this honor on the entirety of Alethkar, like how he gets from A to B is going to determine a lot about how we view modern Dalinar. And
Right.
So we've talked about this a couple times. I'm really nervous about how he gets there, because it's gonna, I know, change my perspective of Dalinar as a character completely, or it might. So I'm comforted that he's going to get to a better place. I'm nervous how he's going to get to a better place.
You're nervous that he's going to cheat his way to becoming a better person and not actually journey his way there. He's just going to shortcut it.
Yeah, kind of. If all of his honor, if all of his good leadership, all the things we talked about in Way of Kings, that awesome climactic moment at the end of Way of Kings where he surrenders his shard blade to buy the Bridgeman, if all of that is built on the fact that he doesn't know who he is, that's going to cause me problems, because it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to process his character and the decisions he's made if he's only making them because he's lost his identity. Now, if there's more of a journey there, then yes, fine. But if it is simply, I have no memory of the tragic, horrible things I've done, therefore I'm a good guy. Oh no, now I remember what I've done. Am I really a bad guy? It's a very, very interesting character arc. I'm really excited to see where we're going to go. I'm also terrified.
Yeah, for sure. That scene in Way of Kings where he says "for the Bridgeman" and then throws
Yes.
Oathbringer into the Justice Glyph. It's my favorite scene in Stormlight. Maybe my favorite scene in fiction I've ever read, to be honest.
And I'm scared we're going to have to have a conversation at some point in the future about, does that act still have the same weight that it does to us now? Like,
right.
I'm with you. That is like the iconic moment of this whole series so far. But is the rug gonna get pulled out from under us? Are we gonna have to look back on that and analyze, does it still count?
Right.
Or yeah, we'll see.
The second part of this chapter, Dalinar finds some alcohol eventually, but he goes to the beggar's porch, which is in the back, basically the back seat of the palace, down from the kitchens. That's where all the beggars, sit and wait for the scraps after the feast. And he finds his old drinking pal, Ahu, who we've never met. And Paul, in the live reactions channel for our patrons, you made me laugh on this one, because your live reaction was something to the effect of, I don't know if this is just some random guy or somebody really important. And you could kind of say that for all of our in the shadow characters that we meet in Stormlight, like, is this really just somebody we're meeting for one time and it doesn't really matter? Or is this, like, somebody super important under a different name that we should know? So what did you guys think?
So Ahu, first off, I think the audio, like, just a side note, I think listening to the audiobook like helped me a lot with picturing Ahu. It did a great job, like, giving him a good voice and giving him this, like, kind of crazy and, like, drunken personality, I guess. I don't know. It just was really, like, it put a good image in my mind. But it was weird because so Ahu is always talking about, like, oh, the voices aren't too bad today. They're just telling me to, like, kill myself or whatever. Like, it's just, like, really, like, deep stuff. But he's like, not a bad day, right? And him and Dallin are kind of relating over just having really, really crazy, like, traumatic experiences, I guess, which was interesting. Yeah, and about Ahu being important or not, like, he had the level of craziness that I'm like, you could be some just crazy beggar guy, or you could be a herald. Like, I don't fully know. So, it's interesting.
This is one of those moments where I sometimes break out of character as a reader, if that's a thing, where I'm fully immersed, I'm following along with my character, I'm taking everything at face value, and then something like this happens, and you kind of pause, and you're like, okay, here's a could be nobody or could be important who drops some interesting names and makes some interesting, crazy claims. This could be a lunatic an alcoholic who's just mindlessly blathering about nothing. Or this could be really insightful clues about the secrets of Roshar. And I tend to lean towards the latter, kind of because why else would it be in here? As the author, he could just toy with us, which we've seen Sanderson kind of do this with us before. So maybe this is the case. And just have a character, be insane and ramble off stuff that means nothing. Or he can use this moment to, slip in a few things that are like, aha, this will be your little secret without actually telling you anything. Like, if I'm the author, why not do that? So I tend to think like, ooh, these have got to be good nuggets of something.
You guys are getting to the point of Stormlight awareness, Stormlight vocabulary, where you know what to look for. You just don't quite have the picture of This is what I'm seeing. You just know, okay, he's hiding something here. I can understand that. I still don't know what it is.
And just kind of the way he's talking and sort of the names that he's dropping, he actually does mention one we have seen before. We might have seen some of the other ones before, but one caught my eye, and that was Moloch. We've seen that one mentioned before, and I get all the random obscure names kind of mixed up, but I know that's one of the references to, like, it's either the death rattles that Taravangian is working on, or potentially like the thrill. I don't remember which one of those that was tied to, but some sort of spren. So I'm kind of making a sort of jump that perhaps he's referencing like unmade, like different types of unmade here, perhaps. But yeah, you're right. We have enough to know this is important, but not enough to know why or what.
Quick, just one more thing before we move on. Have we seen Ahu before?
Not that I recall, but it would not surprise me if we have.
I think Trevor just likes to ask this question every time we meet a character.
Yep.
Just to make us think. I don't want to make a definitive statement, but
So I will say
I don't
this.
think we have.
You guys can go searching for this after, but we have seen him before. And where we saw him was episode 1 of Following Nodon. Szeth walks past him in the prologue.
Oh.
So you can go read the prologue of The Way of Kings if you'd like.
Wow.
there's an interesting,
wow.
there's a very interesting conversation that Szeth has on his way into the castle.
Interesting.
Which I'm sure at the time we wrote off as, well, that can't be important. So now that we know that
Yeah,
maybe,
like, I
hey,
didn't
this
pay
is a
attention
character
to
who knows a little more than we think he does. Interesting.
All right.
Wow. That's a blast from the past.
Yeah, there you go. That was a year and a half ago at this point.
Yeah.
More than.
Yeah.
All right, into 89. We are rejoining probably our A plot of Oathbringer so far. We've tried to retake Kholinar. Kholinar has fallen. We've escaped into Shadesmar. We're in Shadesmar, and Adolin, we've got our 4 humans, Adolin, Kaladin, Shallan, and Azure, and we have our 3 Spren, Syl, Pattern, and what's her face? We don't know her name.
Yeah.
Our Adolin and Kaladin are kind of rightfully so freaking out at the opening of this chapter. They've just been thrown into Shadesmar for the first time, Azure and Shallan. As we learned a couple chapters ago, they've both been here before, so they've got their wits about them a little bit better. Kaladin is all over the place. He's sad about Kholinar. He's sad about Elokar. He's freaking out about Spren being people in, like, Syl full size in Shadesmar. So Kaladin's all over the place. Adolin, this is from the perspective of Adolin, this chapter. And Adolin's just trying to do a head count, kind of, as this chapter opens. He's looking around. Oh, Kaladin's clearly not okay. Shallan seems to be doing just fine. She's kind of crazy. Whatever. Azure's over there. She has her Shardblade next to her. Wait, she has her Shardblade next to her. That's not a thing in Shadesmar. Do you guys want to talk about this?
I do. I want to talk about this a bit. So here we are in the midst of the marbles, and okay, I have a couple things I want to bring up. So you mentioned our 4 humans and our 3 Spren, right? And then there's also the 2 like ginormous Spren, which I believe in this episode we learn are the Spren of the Oathgate.
Right.
Which I thought was interesting. I don't really have that. I didn't think about that much. It was kind of one of those things where I've got like 20 things I'm trying to think about, and then that came on, and I was like, I'll get to that later. Like, I'll just add it to the list, come back to that at another time, which is very interesting. But with this Spren, our 3 normal Spren, I guess, we learn that this 3rd unknown to us Spren is dead. It is Adolin's sword. It's not Azure's Spren like we initially thought. And Adolin even tries to summon his Shardblade, and she just like screeches, and it's like really horrifying. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, okay." And just has no expression, like nothing. It's just a dead Spren there that screeches if he tries to summon her, and I don't understand how that works, but. So this isn't Azure Spren. It is Adolin's sword. We've learned that, and also that you don't like summon your Shardblade or anything in Shadesmar.
Which I know we said last time that if this turned out to be Adolin Spren, it would have been a huge shock, and it does turn out to be Adolin Spren, sort of, right?
Right.
It's not his like radiant bond Spren, but it is the Spren of his Shardblade. It's his Shardblade, which is interesting. But the fact that Azure's Shardblade is not a Spren, clearly, like, is it even a Shardblade? They keep calling it a Shardblade, but in my mind, that like makes it not a Shardblade at this point. So now I'm curious, is this a different classification of weapon? We know it sort of behaved like one in battle, right? It was a little different than the regular Shardblades in that it didn't burn out the eyes of the people it destroyed, but it also was like able to cut through walls and stuff like that, right?
So let's talk about the rules of a normal Shardblade, and then we'll compare Azure's Azure's sword to it. So a normal, like Adolin's Shardblade in the physical realm, it has a gemstone at the pommel that he uses to bind to himself to it so he can dismiss it and summon it. Takes 10 heartbeats to do so. As you cut someone with a Shardblade, you burn their eyes and they die, unless they have Stormlight, in which it burns that part of the body, and you have to cut their spine if they have Stormlight. So if you remember Kaladin and Szeth fighting, Szeth slices Kaladin's arm, Adolin notices, his arm kind of goes dead, and Kaladin heals himself with Stormlight, and he's totally fine after getting hit by Szeth's Shardblade. Azure's Shardblade turns any skin it touches ashen gray, kind of like what happened to Kaladin, except I don't know if we can assume this actually, but we're assuming that the Palastiyar don't have Stormlight. Maybe they have something else because they're Radiance according to Sudan, but it just burns the skin it touches. It doesn't burn the eyes. So there's your similarities, there's your differences. She can't dismiss it, or at least she hasn't dismissed it in the physical realm, and it followed her into Shadesmar.
This is where I get to step in, I think. With my theory that is not based off of that much, but we've seen enough now that I am considering that we have swords, we have shard blades, we have honor blades, and then we've seen a couple that don't fit into any of our rules. Honor blades and shard blades, I'm assuming, are basically the same. If there are some, obviously honor blades give surge binding powers, so that's a big difference, right? But we've seen now Azure's sword, which until she dismisses it is very different, and it's in the cognitive realm, so also very different. We also have Nightblood, which is really different from the rest, right? And so I'm wanting to make this is me, I want to make another category and kind of put them in there, and my guess is that they may be from the spiritual realm. That was my thought, guys. There's only one other realm left, so that's what I'm going with. But in my mind, that makes sense. That maybe it draws its power and it goes by these different rules because it's from the spiritual realm.
And we can tie chapter 90 into this too, because that's where we meet Nightblood again, who comes back into our story. Do you guys remember the rules of Nightblood back in Warbreaker? How was Nightblood equipped? What was the dangers of Nightblood? How did he react when he was used? Do you guys remember those rules?
So Nightblood, what's the word I want to use for it? Deletes or devastates or destroys evil. That's probably the right word. Destroys evil. Like what he sees as evil. He has a complete mind of his own. So he can fight on his own, right? He doesn't actually need someone to wield him, doesn't he? But he can be wielded, and whenever he's drawn, he feeds on immense amounts of power and Stormlight or anything. And if you had him out of his sheath too long, you would be at risk of dying because he would just consume too much of you, from what I understand.
Right. So back in Warbreaker, you can't summon. Well, first of all, you can't summon Nightblood if you're evil, because he'll kill you, and that was part of the test that Vasher had for Vivenna, as he offered her the sword. She didn't take it, and if you're evil, you're gonna take it and then die because Nightblood. You also needed breaths. You needed, I think it said, at least 50 breaths of the whatever heightening that was to even draw Nightblood, and he started feeding off your breaths as soon as you did draw him. So that's what Szeth is instructed here to do, is don't draw Nightblood unless you have a bunch of Stormlight handy. So,
and it seems pretty clear that Azure's blade is not like of that caliber. With Nightblood, it's clearly not. Well, maybe we can't quite make this assumption, but it doesn't seem to be drawing immense amounts of power from Azure or from those around it. It doesn't seem to be sentient in any way. But I'm kind of with you, Paul. I am kind of leaning towards maybe lumping Azure's Blade in a category with Nightblood. They seem to be like swords with similar Shard Blade-ish powers that clearly aren't the same as our more traditional Shard Blades. So I'm on board with kind of putting those two in the same circle of our Venn diagram, at least for a while till we learn more.
Mm-hmm. My thought process with that was a category where not all those swords are like the same, but I don't know, maybe they follow some similar rules, but they're obviously very different, or maybe draw their power from a different place. We haven't seen from Azure's perspective, right? So we don't know if there's like communication there, because from what I understand, Nightblood only talks to his wielder, right? Or I think so. I could be wrong, but that's my thought of Azure can talk to her blade, but
Yeah,
in the same way Nightblood talks to Vasher, talks to Szeth or whatever. But they are like very different still from each other. But
we can talk about Nightblood more here in a second, but as we're leaving chapter 89 here, did you guys notice Azure's hair? Adolin noticed Azure's hair.
I sure did. As we're talking about Nightblood and potential origins of where we know Nightblood came from with the world of Warbreaker, I immediately was drawn to the hair changing color, because we've seen that before, and we've seen that be really important before. And this is, I think, I'm trying to remember if this is the first time we've seen Azure's hair do this, or if we actually saw it before already. But yeah, Adolin notices that her hair changes. So yeah, here's another bit of evidence for Azure does not come from here.
Azure in Kolinar, Azure's hair is described as like silver gray, and then in this chapter, towards the end of the chapter, it starts bleeding to black. So, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
This opens a lot of questions for me, because like we don't know, maybe we're seeing, I don't know. But my thoughts are like, okay, if we took a character directly from our Warbreaker story, like Vasher or Vivenna or someone, and just stuck them right into Stormlight, like our Stormlight archive story, like how would that work, I guess? And I'm assuming we've seen people who change their hair color, like Hoyd and now Azure and stuff. So I'm assuming that's kind of the case, but I just don't know how those rules work. I just don't know and stuff. So
I do want to say, trying to remember back to Warbreaker, that the only people we saw, like the hair changing thing, was supposedly part of the royal bloodline, right?
Right.
That was how they could tell that the two sisters were part of that royal bloodline. And I remember specifically Vivenna was really good at like controlling her hair color, right?
Right.
She could control her emotions and keep her hair color the color she wanted to, because the hair changing thing was tied to like when their emotions changed or how they were feeling. And so that sort of kind of logic or rules could be fairly consistently applied here almost. What if Azure is really good at controlling her emotions and keeping her hair that lighter color or darker color, whatever it is, and then as soon as she gets to Shadesmar, maybe she's so terrified in that moment, she knows this is horrible, this is going to be bad. Maybe that's just enough emotion to make her kind of crack a little bit, and the hair changes colors, and then slowly she's getting herself back under control as this chapter goes. And then at the end of it, Adolin notices like, oh, hey, your hair's back to the, what it was before, or it's different. Maybe she's kind of getting it back under control.
Anything else? All right, we've talked about it a little bit already, but chapter 90, we have your Szeth content finally. Paul. We catch up with him. He is kind of dropped in the middle of these Skybreaker trainees, and that's kind of all the context we get. We don't really... He was given Nightblood at the end of Words of Radiance, and that's how the scene ended for him. And by the end of this chapter, we learn that Nail leaves him with the Skybreakers and says, oh, he's experienced with Stormlight. He can fast forward to the third ideal. I give him permission to do that. And then the trainee guys were like, well, I don't know about that. Nail's not here right now, so we're going to have you train with the rest. So that's kind of where we pick up. He's here. By the end of this, he says his first ideal, and he whispers it to Nightblood. But he says the first ideal of the Night's Radiant. That's where we pick up with him.
So I know he's like, at this point, he's kind of expecting to be able to surge bind again, which I was too. But don't we learn in this chapter that that's not the case with Skybreakers? It's like that they have kind of a system. It's like you speak your first ideal, then you become a squire of someone else, and then you train and learn, and then you do the second ideal, and that's when you can surge bind, and then the third one is like bonding a spren or something like that, which was different from what we've seen before.
If you want to compare this, to our Windrunner guys, it's kind of just Bridge 4 who are all hanging out, and they're getting squiredom kind of just by osmosis of hanging out by Kaladin enough. Here, they have rules. You're not allowed to use Stormlight until you've said the second ideal. If you're using Stormlight, that's bad. Don't do that. Like, you're not allowed yet. So you're going to say the first ideal, you're going to be a squire, then you can say the second one, you find a high spren. Like, they have strict rules on how to become a Night Radiant, how to become a Skybreaker.
We also, another Skybreaker fact we learn in this chapter is that the second surge, we know the first surge of Skybreakers is the lashings. They've, just like the Windrunners, they fly around. We learn the second one is division. But all we get told here is that it's the more dangerous one of the two. It definitely sounds dangerous. I think we've talked before about the various surges and who they apply to in the different orders. So I think we may have mentioned this before, but the implications of whatever division might be sounds scary.
And isn't it shared with Dustbringers too? I don't remember, but I think I remember them having division.
Yes, it is shared with
Okay.
Dustbringers.
Okay.
So
That makes me even more curious.
the other direction from Skybreakers is Windrunners, and then Windrunners is Bondsmiths. But then as you're going the other way around the circle, it's Windrunners, Skybreakers, Dustbringers. Towards our chaotic side of the circle, if you will.
Yeah.
So another interesting bit in the beginning of this chapter is about Szeth's rebirth. When we get a little bit of information here on exactly what happened, which I've been a little confused by this, so I do think this might be potentially important. I'm kind of stuck on the fact of, did Szeth die, and was he brought back to life, or was he on the brink of death and simply saved from dying? And I don't even know if this distinction is all that important, but it seems like it might be. And it's confused even by the fact of, like we discussed a while back, that there's two different versions of how he died, right? There's
Right.
There's the retcon of how he was actually killed, which could play into, did he actually die? This chapter sheds a little bit of light on it, and it talks about, we were mentioning this a little bit before, his spirit. It kind of describes his spirit. Well, the book says this: the herald had used a type of fabrial to heal his body before his spirit departed. It had almost taken too long, however. His spirit hadn't properly reattached to his body. So I read that and I think, okay, before his spirit had departed, he is not dead. He's on the brink of death, and he's saved, brought back, healed. But then on the very next page in my book, there's a statement that then seems to contradict this. It says over there, he no longer feared them. He had died and been forced to return. Well, that clearly says that he was dead and came back. So I don't even know at this point whether Szeth is officially like resurrected and brought back to his body, or if he was just less magically and more medically saved. I'm confused.
In my head, I think it's basically the same. It's like we see what Nail did, which is he reattached the soul, but not perfectly yada yada.
Mhm.
Like it was at the very last second, he was basically dead. And from Szeth's understanding, he was probably laying there dead, like, you know, like obviously if he wasn't saved like right when he would have died. Like he was probably declarable as dead or so. So that's I think I'm taking that with a grain of salt, I guess. Of like Szeth was basically dead, like, you know.
So there is a good definition for this, but I will say it's going to be a while on our reading schedule before you actually understand the rules here. But just understand, or take this and move forward with this. He was dead, and the mechanics of how Nail reattached his spirit aren't explained here, and it's actually explained in a Mistborn book. Not to get too many spoilers there, but it's a Mistborn book. It's not even the first 3 Mistborn books. It's like an independent Mistborn book, and the mechanics of how a spirit lives on and then can reattach to a body, like that, all is explained in another Cosmere book. So, but take it if you really care about the definition of was he dead or was he not. He was dead for 30 seconds. If you want to take it that way.
Okay, I'll run with that.
Trevor gave us a real answer. Can you believe that? Look at that.
Sort
He
of.
was like,
I
"Look,
mean,
this is what you're looking for." Well, yeah. But you gave a definitive. Yeah, he was dead, I guess. So, for the purpose of this, so I'll take it. I'll take what I can get.
we get a name drop of Nail in this episode, and Szeth just refers to him as he dropped him off with the Skybreakers, and then he left to go seek guidance, whatever that means. After Edge Dancer, which if you guys haven't read Edge Dancer, Nail is hunting Lift, and he realizes that the desolation is here. He's been trying to stop the desolations by killing all other orders of Knights Radiant besides the Skybreakers, and he's failed, and he's realized that now, so then he drops Szeth off with the Skybreakers and is going to seek guidance, whatever that means.
I was particularly interested in this tidbit, actually, because I'm very interested in Nail and who he is as a herald. Like, is he someone worth following, or is he evil? Like, that's kind of the tough question, is not only can you justify what he's doing, it's more of like, is he a good guy? Like, that's the tough question. So this seems to point to the fact that after the events of Edge Dancer, which is where we saw him last, he does, at least from Szeth, through Szeth's words, seem to have acknowledged that he was wrong, or be forced to, realize, oh, the desolation is here. I need to not be murdering all of the Radiants I can find, or at least perhaps that's the case. And so gone to seek guidance seems like a positive thing to me. It seems like maybe he's reevaluating the last few thousand years he's spent going around murdering people. So maybe that's going to be a good turn for him.
Maybe.
I hope. Yeah, maybe.
The strange small tidbits of Nail we've gotten to this point. Nail's not in the best of light, and the Skybreaker's not in the best of light. So any information we can get about the Skybreakers is interesting, if not hopeful, for the people who calibrated Skybreaker on the Knights Radiant quiz.
I was gonna say, as Skybreakers yourselves, how do y'all feel?
I feel fine, but that's because I've read more content than you guys have.
That's fair. That's fair. How are you feeling right now, Elliot, with our current reading?
Unsure with where we're at here in the book. It seems I don't have enough information to fully, decide how I feel about being lumped in the Skybreaker group. I want to that, the ideals of being a Skybreaker, or the highest execution of what being a Skybreaker is supposed to be, like perhaps the way it was long before, seems like something honorable and worth doing. The version of it now that we're seeing does seem maybe like twisted. Maybe this is not the way Skybreakers were supposed to function when they first started, or maybe it is, and maybe they are more of like a morally gray area. They're a very legally black and white group, but potentially very morally gray. Maybe that's just who they are. I'm not sure.
Who's the antagonist in Les Mis? Is it Javert? Is that his name?
Yes, Inspector Javert.
Yeah, I always view him as Nail, like the Skybreaker. You will follow the law to the death, and if you steal food to feed yourself, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth because you broke the law. That's the extreme Skybreaker Nail version, the twisted version of I don't care about your well-being, I care about the law being enforced. And that's 100% Skybreaker, no Windrunner at all part of like calibration there. So that's the comparison I draw is to Javert.
Well, should we move on to talk about Kaladin to wrap up this episode?
Yeah. So we actually get a Kaladin flashback chapter. When's the last time we had one of those? And this is right when he's joined Amaram's army. And Tien is still alive at this point. And Kaladin is kind of getting a punishment from his squad leader. And he's doing KP. And Kaladin's asking, oh, why am I getting punished? I didn't really I backtalked to a Light Eyes or whatever. He wasn't like directly superior to me. I don't understand why I'm getting punished here. And his sergeant guy or whatever, he says, oh, don't worry about it. You're kind of setting yourself apart from the squad. This is just so that you get accepted with the squad. And once they see that you're not above getting punished like the rest of them, then they'll accept you into the squad. And Kaladin doesn't really know how he feels about that, but it does work. And once he's done with his minor slap on the wrist, that the other squad guys are like, oh, that we'll accept Kaladin into our little clique here. What are your guys' thoughts on this before I go on a little tangent?
This chapter seemed a little random at first. It kind of leads back into the present day as it goes, but I was kind of confused when at first. I was like, wait, why are we back in Kaladin's past? This is confusing, but yeah.
I won't go too much into this tangent that I'm about to do, but Ender's Game is a sci-fi book, and a big takeaway from Ender's Game is the military steals the innocence of young adolescents. And Ender, who is the main character of Ender's Game, there's minor spoilers for Ender's Game for the next 30 seconds if anybody cares. Ender gets indoctrinated into the army, and he learns the hard life. He gets bullied by like some of the other military guys, and it changes Ender to do that to other members of the military. So he starts hardening people below him once he kind of climbs the ranks a couple times, and that's kind of their critique on the military from Ender's Game point of view of it. It kind of robs the innocence of young adolescents, and that's what's happening here. Is they're kind of trying to harden Kaladin up, and Kaladin's kind of afraid in this chapter that he'll actually be a good soldier, and up until this point he's been told by his father that being a soldier is not worth pursuing. Like, killing doesn't matter who you're killing for. It's not worth doing. We're going to be surgeons. We're going to heal the soldiers who are misguided.
I really like
a
your
really good connection.
I agree. I think that's a really cool parallel to Ender's Game, and I remember reading that book as well, and that's a really interesting connection that you've made there that I think is definitely applicable there. I'd have to go read that book again to maybe draw some more conclusions there. But I remember kind of watching what happens to Ender in that story is painful, like really painful to see what happens to him, and drawing some of those connections to Kaladin and seeing the way that his experiences have really impacted him in a like hard to watch someone go through that sort of way is really interesting.
I think Ender and Cal have two different reactions to it. I think Cal preserves a lot of his good ideals and Ender does not. But yeah, anyway. The reason why we're getting a flashback chapter here is we're getting within the context of the last time he froze in battle. As the ending part 3 of Oathbringer, he sees Saw and Beard fighting and then killing each other in the throne room where Elhokar dies, and he freezes. He doesn't know if he's fighting on the right side anymore. He sees both sides and why they're fighting, and he freezes. And so within the context of last time he froze or why he froze, it's back when Tien was still alive and Kaladin is in the army these early days, getting his punishments of army life. And then the episode the chapter kind of closes with back in the present day. They're in Shadesmar. Kaladin is pretty torn up about what's happened in part 3, and Syl is getting fairly concerned about Kaladin maybe slipping back into the wretch, as Kaladin calls himself during these times. Do you guys have any other takeaways?
I had one last thing I'll mention in this chapter that I noticed was actually not specifically dealing with Kaladin. It was Syl and Pattern. We finally get some kind of Syl and Pattern interaction. I've been hoping this was going to be more of a thing. Now that we're in Shadesmar and Pattern and Syl are like standing next to each other, we know there's a rivalry between Honorspren and Cryptics. And so I was hoping we'd get like some banter or some argument or some kind of like, how do the two of these interact? And they kind of seem to be ignoring each other-ish so far through the scenes we've seen so far. But there is a little bit here in the conversation between Syl and Kaladin where Kaladin's like, yeah, that Pattern guy, he's pretty nice, And Syl's like, yeah, that's the strange part about him. Kind of implication there being like she's expecting him to be this terrible person, and he's not. And so that little bit, I laughed when I read that line.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I was expecting that as well. I was expecting some more dialogue, and I was really curious to see. I also think it's strange that Syl and Pattern didn't really like react much to the other Spren, right? Like, is this just normal with dead Spren that they just kind of hang around and like they just seemed unaffected? I was like, in the physical realm where us people are, right? If there was like a dead person right next to you, you probably wouldn't just be like, yeah, they're cool, like like.
Oh yeah, Fred. He's been over in the corner there for a few years now.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit odd, but
Yeah, we broke a chair a couple years ago, and he's still sitting over there.
yeah,
broken chairness.
Man. So it's a bit odd, and yeah, I didn't have too much to say about this chapter, I guess.
Any closing thoughts on episode 81?
I'm really curious how we're going to get out of our Shadesmar predicament. Maybe that's going to be the whole rest of the book, is them getting out of Shadesmar. Maybe that's the second story, but they seem like they're in a pickle.
Yeah, I don't fully know what you do to get out of Shadesmar, but I will say I'm really, really curious, because if they manage to like navigate or like go see stuff in Shadesmar, all we've seen so far in Shadesmar is just the pile of marbles, right? So if we actually got to like see stuff and see like a spread civilization or whatever, that would be really cool.
Sounds good. We can call it there and reconvene next week. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot.
See you guys.
Farewell.